In lesson 65, we're going to dive into distinguishing types of parallelograms. Well, parallelograms is automatically assumed to have opposite parallel sides, but that is more broad than some of these definitions that we're going to have here. And so we're going to see if we can go from broad in the name parallelogram to a more narrow type of quadrilateral. So let's look at different properties here. Starting with property 1, it says if an angle is a right angle, then the parallelogram, this is my abbreviation of parallelogram, then the parallelogram is a rectangle. So, like so, we already know that these opposite sides are parallel, so it's a parallelogram, but we can determine more detailed what type it is. So if there's one right angle, then it's a rectangle. Next one states, if consecutive sides are congruent, then it's a rhombus. Okay, so what if you have, for 2, what if you have this, all sides are parallel to each other? It says consecutive sides have to be congruent. So here's an example of consecutive sides being congruent. 2 adjacent sides are congruent, so it's a rhombus. Number 3 says that if diagonals are congruent, then it is a rectangle. All right, so our diagonals are all congruent, so then it's a rectangle. Number 4, if diagonals are perpendicular, to where they form 90-degree angles, the parallelogram is a rhombus. And then the last one is if the diagonals bisect opposite angles, so it cuts these angles into even segments, then the parallelogram is a rhombus. Those are just 5 different types of parallelograms. We'll look at some examples. Example 1 says, is this a rhombus if x equals 11? Is this parallelogram a rhombus if x equals 11? Notice it already has given us our parallel opposite sides, so now we're just trying to prove it. We already know it's a parallelogram, now we're trying to prove it's a rhombus. So we plug in x equals 11 to 3x minus 4. Well, 3 times 11 is 33, minus 4, that's 29. Well, is it a rhombus if this side is 29 and this side is 30? Looking back at number 2, it says consecutive sides have to be congruent for it to be a parallelogram. So therefore, for the parallelogram to be a rhombus. So therefore, no, it is not a rhombus, because consecutive sides not congruent. Let's look at example 3. Is parallelogram KLMN a rhombus? Okay, well, some properties that were stated. If that's for a rectangle, we're looking for rhombus. If diagonals are perpendicular, then the parallelogram is a rhombus. So we can actually figure out if this angle right here is perpendicular, because we already have 2 of the angles in the triangle at 50 and 40. So we simply do triangle sum theorem to figure out this angle. 50 plus 40 is 90, and we're trying to get it to be 180. When we subtract 90, we notice that x is 90 as well. So therefore it is a perpendicular angle. Yes, it is a rhombus. And those are just different properties to distinguish different types of parallelograms. The math is very simple though, just knowing the properties of these shapes.